Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're diving straight into a truly mind-bending experiment. We often wonder what happens when you strip away human bias, political rhetoric, and emotional reasoning from a highly controversial court case. Well, that's exactly what we're unpacking right now. We took the official, real-world court documents of a heavily debated legal conviction and fed them into 6 of the world's most advanced AI models. Our goal? To see exactly how impartial machine logic processes human justice. It's this brilliant collision of code and constitutional law, and you're definitely going to want to see how this plays out. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the digital legal consensus. 2, the case of the retweets. 3, dismantling the logic. 4, a broken judicial process. 5, the multi-model matrix. And 6, AI as the legal watchdog.
All right, part 1. The digital legal consensus. 6 models, 1 conclusion.
So here's the rigorous setup we used to test this out. We gave these exact 6 models, DeepSeek, Qwen, Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, and Copilot, the official indictment, the trial verdict, and the appeal ruling of an independent scholar named Dr. Chen Jingyuan. We asked them to evaluate the text strictly on legal logic, evidentiary standards, and procedural fairness. We really wanted to see what the digital consensus would be. And keep in mind, these models operate on entirely distinct architectures, but as you'll see, their conclusions lined up with absolute precision.
Moving on to part 2, the case of the retweets, the facts. Let's look objectively at what the defendant, who is a physics PhD, actually did. Between 2019 and 2022, he used software to access Twitter, or X. What's truly wild here is the scale. When you hear a phrase like causing severe public disorder in a digital space, you probably picture massive viral campaigns, right? Well, his account had fewer than 100 followers, and over a 3-year period, his total retweets of political cartoons, academic opinions, and articles were under 100. The AIs immediately noted this incredibly low volume as a foundational fact of the whole case.
Now contrast that remarkably tiny digital footprint with this number, 20. That's the 20 months he was sentenced to prison. The specific criminal charge was picking quarrels and provoking trouble in cyberspace. The models instantly flagged a massive disparity here. We're talking about clicking retweet a few dozen times to a microscopic audience, resulting in nearly 2 years behind bars. To evaluate that disparity, the AI model zeroed right in on the core legal requirement of the charge. The law explicitly states that to be guilty here, the actions must cause severe public disorder. So naturally, the models ask the most logical question. Did these retweets actually cause severe public disorder?
The cross-model consensus, a resounding no. The AIs combed through the court documents and found absolutely zero evidence to support the claim of public disorder. They noted a total absence of real-world consequences. No public outcry, no network disruptions, no financial hits, nothing. The models pointed out that the court essentially jumped to a conclusion without providing the required empirical proof.
Which brings us to part 3, dismantling the logic, how AI reads the law. Having established the facts, the AIs meticulously tore down the court's legal reasoning step by step. This is really where the cold, hard nature of machine logic outshines human rationalization. Both Qwen and DeepSeek caught this massive logical fallacy known as a category mistake. The law criminalizes spreading false facts, but the AI noted that the court illegally expanded that definition to include subjective art, like a cartoon of a girl with an umbrella, as well as academic opinions and personal emotions. Machine logic dictates that you just can't verify an opinion or a drawing as objectively true or false. By treating subjective expression as an objective falsehood, the court committed a massive semantic error.
And wait until you hear how the court proved criminal intent. The documents claimed that because the defendant has a PhD and a high level of education, he should have known the information was false, and therefore he intentionally spread lies. The models basically threw a red flag on this one. You cannot use a person's educational identity to presume criminal intent. The AIs labeled this an illegal objective imputation. It's essentially guessing someone's mindset based on their diploma rather than actual evidence.
On top of that, the models called the court begging the question. This is a classic circular logic trap. The court used the unproven idea of severe chaos as the established premise for his sentencing. Because they just assumed the chaos existed without ever proving it, they sentenced him for it. It creates this closed, circular loop of logic that the AIs easily identified and rejected.
All right, part 4. a broken judicial process, the procedural flaws.
Beyond the internal logic, the AIs highlighted severe procedural failures, showing that the system failed in practice too. ChatGPT mapped this out perfectly. The errors just kept compounding. It started in September 2022 with a warrantless arrest and a search of his home. Then, in April 2023, the court held a secret first trial, locking out the public and family without any legal justification, like state secrets, being involved. Finally, in May 2023, the appeal was handled purely in writing. No hearing was held to address the disputed facts at all.
But perhaps the most glaring procedural error was sitting right there in the appeal ruling. The AIs neutrally reported that this exact quote, "The appellant did not submit new evidence to prove his appeal," represents a complete reversal of the legal burden of proof. In criminal law, the prosecution has to prove guilt. By demanding that the imprisoned defendant provide new evidence to prove his own innocence, the court fundamentally violated the presumption of innocence.
Let's look at Part 5, the multi-model matrix, unique analytical strengths.
So we know they shared the same conclusion, but it's fascinating to see how they built this matrix of unique analytical flavors. Grok took a very high-level view, evaluating the case against universal human rights. Cohen operated almost like a defense attorney, giving actionable evidence checklists. Gemini dug incredibly deep into the cognitive state of the scientist, while ChatGPT systematically mapped out the procedural collapse. DeepSeek focused on how legal definitions were technically stretched, and Copilot mapped the court's failures directly to specific legal codes. Despite looking through vastly different analytical lenses, their digital legal consensus was perfectly unified.
Ultimately, all 6 models synthesize these 4 undeniable takeaways directly from the source material. First, the basic physical requirements of the crime were totally missing. Second, the assumption of his guilt was logically flawed. Third, procedural justice collapsed at practically every stage. And fourth, basic constitutional rights were completely overlooked. All of this points to a massive, glaring gap between the human judicial rulings and objective, machine-verified legal reasoning.
Finally, Part 6, AI as the legal watchdog, the future.
Let's step back for a second and think about what this means at scale. What happens when we apply this kind of digital intelligence to our legal systems? As our source material beautifully points out, AI models strip away all the political rhetoric. They don't care about status or emotion or slogans. They run solely on strict logic, definitions, and facts. So when humans try to stretch concepts, splice logic together, or use empty rhetoric to justify a decision, machine logic exposes it instantly. In a very real way, AI could act as this untiring, impartial watchdog over human judicial processes, ensuring that logic and evidence remain the absolute foundation of the law.
Which leaves us with this final thought for today's explainer. If an AI can instantly spot the fatal flaws, logical fallacies, and procedural missteps in human justice, things that take humans months or years to untangle, how will it reshape the future of the courtroom? Will algorithms one day review every single verdict just to ensure logical consistency? Think about that. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. I highly encourage you to keep pondering this incredible intersection of machine logic and human law. Until next time, stay curious.